The starship Swift Claw hung motionless in the darkness of space, its angular hull reflecting the distant starlight. Inside the ship's meeting chamber, the air grew thick with tension as Diplomatic Officer Thomas Gray stood calmly before 12 pairs of large yellow eyes. The aliens called themselves the Stalkers, and they lived up to their name. Their bodies were covered in dark, scale-like armor, and their long fingers ended in sharp claws. They moved with the careful precision of natural hunters, and their ships patrolled the edges of their territory like watchful predators. Gray maintained his professional stance, hands folded behind his back. This was his 100th first contact mission, but something felt different about this one. The Stalkers had allowed his small diplomatic vessel to dock with their patrol ship, but their hospitality ended there. "We bring greetings from Earth and the United Human Systems," Gray said, his voice clear and steady. He kept his expression pleasant, with a small smile, the same approach that had worked countless times before. Captain Stone, the Stalker commander, stepped forward. Like all his kind, he stood nearly 8 feet tall, his head almost brushing against the chamber's ceiling. His yellow eyes narrowed as he studied Gray. "Your kind ventures far from your territory, human," Stone said through the translator. His voice came out as a series of clicks and growls, transformed into English by the small device on Gray's collar. "Why do you seek us out?" "We believe in peaceful contact between species," Gray explained, his smile warming slightly. "Our scans detected your civilization's expansion in this sector, and we hope to establish diplomatic relations." The Stalkers in the room shifted uneasily. One of them, wearing what appeared to be a science officer's markings, whispered something to Captain Stone. The captain's posture suddenly became rigid. "You bare your teeth at us while speaking of peace," Stone said, his claws clicking against the metallic floor as he took a step closer. "Do you take us for fools?" Gray's diplomatic training kicked in, and he quickly realized his mistake. Different species often had different interpretations of facial expressions. He tried to smooth his features into a neutral expression, but years of habit made it difficult. "I apologize for any offense," Gray said carefully. "In human culture, what you see is called a smile. It's a sign of friendliness and peaceful intentions." The science officer made a harsh sound that the translator couldn't process. More Stalkers entered the chamber, their armor clicking as they moved. Gray noticed their clawed hands resting on what appeared to be weapon holsters. "In our culture," Captain Stone said, "showing teeth is a death threat, and you have been threatening us since you arrived." Gray's heart beat faster, but his extensive training kept him outwardly calm. "This is a cultural misunderstanding. I can explain." "Enough." Stone's voice boomed through the chamber. "You smile while standing in our territory. You smile while claiming peace. Every word from your mouth comes with teeth. We are not blind to your true intentions." More Stalkers appeared at the chamber's entrances. Gray counted at least 20 now, and all of them had drawn their weapons, sleek, dark devices that hummed with energy. "Captain Stone," Gray said, keeping his voice level, "I represent a peaceful mission. If my expression has caused offense, I apologize. Perhaps we should take a moment to—" "Your apologies mean nothing," Stone interrupted. "We know of humans. Your kind survived on a heavy world, evolved through constant conflict. You think us weak because we evolved in lighter gravity." Gray slowly raised his hands, showing they were empty. "No one thinks you're weak. We genuinely wish to establish peaceful relations." His mouth betrayed him again, curling slightly at the corners, a diplomat's instinct to appear non-threatening. But to the Stalkers, every attempt at appearing peaceful only confirmed their suspicions. Captain Stone raised his hand, and 20 weapons hummed to life. "One last chance, human," Stone growled. "Return to your ship. Leave our territory. Never return." Gray knew that turning his back on armed Stalkers would be an even worse mistake. He had to salvage this situation. Somewhere in his diplomatic training, there had to be a solution for this. He opened his mouth to try one last time, but he never got the chance to speak. The tension in the chamber grew heavier with each passing second. Gray's mind raced through his diplomatic training, searching for a way to defuse the situation. Around him, 20 stalkers held their weapons steady, their yellow eyes fixed on his every movement. "Your history speaks against you, human," Captain Stone said, his claws tapping against his weapon. "Our intelligence reports show your kind survived wars, diseases, and natural disasters that would have killed most species. You grew strong in the crushing gravity of your world. Why should we believe you come in peace?" As Stone spoke, Gray's mind drifted briefly to the classified briefing he'd received before this mission. The captain wasn't wrong about humanity's resilience, but he didn't know the whole truth. He didn't know about Project SHIELD, or why Gray had been chosen for this mission. 20 years ago, human scientists had made a breakthrough in genetic engineering. They had found a way to enhance the natural durability of human cells, making them nearly indestructible. Gray had been one of the first volunteers for the program. His bones were now stronger than steel, his skin could withstand extreme temperatures, and his muscles could take incredible punishment without tearing. But that was classified information. Information he couldn't share, even to save his life. "Captain," Gray tried again, "you're right about humanity's history of survival. But that's exactly why we seek peaceful contact. We've learned from our past." A younger stalker officer moved forward, his armor marking him as Lieutenant Reed. "Captain, look at his stance. Even surrounded by our weapons, he shows no fear. This must be a trap." Gray realized his calm demeanor was working against him. To the stalkers, a normal person should be terrified. His composure, meant to be professional, appeared sinister to them. "In our history," Stone growled, "we learned about smiling predators. They bare their teeth before they strike. They stand calm before they attack. They act peaceful before they kill." More stalkers entered the chamber, bringing the total to 30. Gray noticed they were spreading out, taking strategic positions. Their military training was impressive, but it made his situation more difficult. "Your kind evolved from pursuit predators," Stone continued. "You chased your prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Your teeth were made for tearing flesh. Your eyes faced forward like all hunters. And still, you claimed peace while showing your teeth." Gray slowly lowered his hands, careful to keep them visible. "Captain, every species evolves from something. What matters is what we choose to become. Humanity chose diplomacy over conflict. We chose lies." Lieutenant Reed interrupted. "Humans are known across 3 sectors for their military prowess. Your ships are powerful. Your soldiers are feared. Even now, you stand before us unafraid." Gray wished he could explain that his calmness came from knowing he couldn't be harmed, not from any hostile intent. The genetic modifications that made him invulnerable were humanity's best-kept secret, designed specifically for situations where diplomacy might fail. One last time, Captain Stone's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Why are you really here?" Before Gray could answer, the ship's computer announced something in the stalker language. The aliens' reaction was immediate. Their postures became even more aggressive. "Your ship just activated its communication array," Stone snarled, "calling for reinforcements." "No," Gray said quickly. "It's a standard diplomatic beacon. All our ships." "Enough of these deceptions," Stone roared. The translator barely managed to handle the volume. "Lieutenant Reed, show this human what we do to threats in our territory." Gray saw Reed's finger tighten on his weapon's trigger. In that split second, he made a decision that would change the course of human-stalker relations forever. He didn't move. He didn't try to dodge. And most importantly, he didn't stop smiling. The chamber was about to witness something that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of humanity. Lieutenant Reed's weapon discharged with a high-pitched whine. The blue energy bolt struck Gray directly in the chest, burning away the front of his diplomatic uniform. The smell of scorched fabric filled the chamber. But Gray didn't fall. He didn't even flinch. Where his uniform had burned away, his skin showed no mark at all, not even a scratch. The chamber fell silent. 30 pairs of yellow eyes widened in disbelief. Even Captain Stone took a step back, his claws clicking against the metal floor. "Impossible," Reed whispered, his weapon shaking in his hands. The translator barely picked up his voice. Gray looked down at his ruined uniform, then back at the stalkers. He kept his voice calm and steady. "I would have preferred to handle this diplomatically." "What are you?" Stone demanded, raising his own weapon. The other stalkers followed suit, their weapons humming with charged energy. "I'm still just a human diplomat," Gray said, brushing some burned fabric from his shoulder. "One who really wishes you'd let me explain about the smiling." Reed fired again and again. Each shot struck Gray with perfect accuracy, burning away more of his uniform but leaving his skin unmarked. The young lieutenant's training was excellent, but it didn't matter. "Your weapons can't hurt me," Gray said, still maintaining his diplomatic tone. "But I still haven't made any aggressive moves. I'm still here to talk." Captain Stone's military training took over. "Spread out. Different angles," he ordered his crew. The stalkers moved with practiced precision, surrounding Gray completely. "That won't make a difference," Gray said. He stayed perfectly still, not wanting any movement to be seen as a threat. "Captain Stone, please, let's return to our discussion. You're some kind of weapon," Stone growled. "A military project disguised as a diplomat." Gray sighed. There was some truth to that, but not in the way they thought. "I'm a diplomat who's been modified to survive hostile situations, but being hard to kill doesn't make me a weapon. I haven't attacked anyone." More shots rang out. The stalkers were firing in coordinated bursts now, their military training showing in their perfect timing and positioning. Energy bolts struck Gray from all sides, burning away the last of his uniform except for his pants, which were made of more resistant material. Through it all, Gray stood calmly, hands still open at his sides. No wounds appeared on his exposed skin. No blood was drawn. He didn't even lose his balance. "Captain," one of the stalker officers called out, "our sensors show no shields or technology. Whatever this is, it's biological." That caused another stir among the stalkers. Their weapons didn't stop firing, but Gray could see the fear in their eyes turning to something else. Curiosity, wonder, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of respect. "Biological engineering," Gray explained between bursts of weapon fire. "Humanity's response to living on a high-gravity world. But we use it for protection, not aggression." Captain Stone raised his hand, and the firing stopped. The chamber filled with the smell of ozone from so many energy discharges. The stalkers' weapons were starting to overheat, their power cells running low. "You just stood there," Stone said, his voice carrying a new tone. "All this firepower, and you just stood there, smiling." "Because I'm not here to fight," Gray replied. "The smile isn't a threat, Captain. It never was. It's an invitation to talk." Stone's yellow eyes studied Gray with new intensity. "Then talk, human. Tell us what manner of species creates diplomats who can't be killed, yet chooses not to conquer." Gray's smile widened just a bit. Finally, they were getting somewhere. But before he could speak, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The stalkers' attention split between him and their warning systems. Something was happening, and Gray had a feeling things were about to get even more complicated. The ship's alarms echoed through the chamber as a voice spoke in the stalker language over the intercom. Gray didn't need a translation to understand that something was wrong. The stalkers' reactions told him everything. 3 more human ships just appeared on our scanners," Captain Stone announced, his yellow eyes locked on Gray. "Your reinforcements." Gray shook his head. "No, my mission is peaceful. Those must be regular patrol ships. They probably detected all the weapon fire." "Convenient timing," Lieutenant Reed snarled, charging his weapon again despite its overheated state. "Captain," the science officer called out, checking a handheld device. "The human is correct. They appear to be standard Human Union patrol vessels. They're maintaining distance but have raised their shields. Stone made a quick decision. All guards, empty your weapons. Full power. If this human has a breaking point, we find it now, before his friends arrive. Gray tried one last time. Captain, this isn't necessary. I can contact those ships, tell them tow. The rest of his words were drowned out by the sound of 30 weapons firing at once. The chamber filled with blinding light as energy bolts struck him from every direction. The barrage was so intense that the stalkers had to shield their eyes. Gray stood in the center of the storm of energy blasts. His remaining clothes began to burn away, leaving only his specially made pants. His skin glowed from the heat of the impacts, but remained unmarked. He didn't stumble, didn't flinch, didn't even close his eyes. Weapons at 80% charge. Someone called out. The attacks continued. Gray could feel the temperature in the chamber rising from all the energy being released. The metal floor beneath his feet began to soften slightly. 60%. Through the constant flashes of weapons fire, Gray noticed something interesting. The stalkers weren't firing out of fear anymore. Their movements were precise, controlled. They were studying him, documenting every shot, learning. 40%. The chamber's environmental systems were working overtime to handle the heat. Gray remained still, his expression calm. He'd been through tests like this before, but never with such tactical precision. 20%. Some of the stalkers' weapons began to shut down, their power cells nearly drained. Others were glowing red from overuse, their built-in safety systems forcing them to stop. Power cells critical. Finally, the last weapon fell silent. The chamber filled with the sound of cooling metal and overworked air filters. 30 stalker warriors stood around Gray, their weapons empty, watching him with a mixture of disbelief and something else. Gray brushed some ash off his shoulder and straightened his posture. His skin gradually stopped glowing as it cooled. He looked at Captain Stone and did something that surprised everyone in the chamber. He bowed slightly. "Your troops are well trained, Captain," Gray said sincerely. "I've never seen such coordinated attacks. The way they adjusted their firing patterns to test different angles was impressive." Stone stepped forward, his empty weapon lowered. You're complimenting our attack." "I'm a diplomat," Gray replied. "Part of diplomacy is recognizing and respecting the strengths of others. Your people just demonstrated exceptional military discipline and tactical thinking." The science officer approached cautiously, his scanning device held out. "Captain, the energy readings are impossible. His body absorbed enough power to run our ship for a day. No known material can do that." "Now," Gray said, his voice still friendly despite everything that had happened, "those patrol ships out there are probably very concerned. Would you allow me to contact them? I'd rather not have this diplomatic meeting interrupted by a rescue attempt." Before Captain Stone could respond, Lieutenant Reed stepped forward. His empty weapon clattered to the floor. "You're not what we expected, human," Reed said. "You smile like a predator, but act like a diplomat." Gray finished for him. "That's because I am one. Now, shall we finally talk about that cultural misunderstanding regarding smiles?" The chamber had changed. Where there had been hostility, now there was curiosity. The stalkers lowered their empty weapons, and Captain Stone ordered most of his crew to return to their posts. Only Stone himself, Lieutenant Reed, and the science officer remained with Gray. "First," Gray said, activating his communication device, "let me handle our visitors." He spoke clearly into the device. "Diplomatic Officer Gray to Human Union patrols. Situation under control. Stand down but maintain position. Cultural exchange in progress." He turned to Stone. "Would you like to confirm that, Captain?" Stone nodded, impressed by the human's attention to protocol, even after being shot at. He sent a similar message to the patrol ships in the stalker language. "Now," Gray said, settling into a more comfortable stance, "let me tell you about Project SHIELD and why humans smile." The science officer's scanning device hummed as Gray began his explanation. Humanity evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day, he said. High gravity, dangerous predators, extreme weather. But our greatest advantage wasn't our strength or speed. It was our ability to adapt. Through genetic engineering, the science officer asked, studying his readings. Gray nodded. That came later. First, we learned to smile. To show others we meant no harm. In our early days when we lived in small groups, a smile meant, I'm not a threat. It meant, let's work together. But you clearly are a threat, Lieutenant Reed interrupted. We just fired enough energy to destroy a small ship. I'm a defense, not a threat, Gray corrected gently. 20 years ago, we developed Project SHIELD. We found a way to make human cells nearly indestructible. But we didn't give this power to our soldiers. You gave it to diplomats, Stone said, understanding dawning in his yellow eyes. Exactly. We chose peace, but we're not naive. We knew not every species would believe our intentions, so we made our diplomats invulnerable. We can't be killed, but we also can't easily kill. The perfect combination for proving peaceful intentions. The science officer looked up from his device. The energy readings make sense now. Your cells don't just resist damage. They absorb and disperse energy. Fascinating. But why maintain the smile? Stone asked. Once you knew it was seen as a threat. Gray's expression softened. Because changing who we are isn't the answer. Understanding each other is. You saw my smile as a threat because in your evolution, baring teeth meant danger. But now you know the truth. It's a sign of peace. A sign of peace backed by indestructible flesh. Reed noted, but his tone had changed from suspicious to respectful. The strongest peace is one that can't be broken by violence, Gray replied. By making our diplomats invulnerable, we removed the fear of death from diplomatic meetings. We can focus entirely on understanding each other. Stone picked up one of the depleted weapons from the floor. We fired on a diplomat. By our laws, that's an act of war. No, Gray said firmly. It was a cultural misunderstanding. One that proved the very point of Project SHIELD. You fired. I survived. And now we're talking. Exactly as intended. The science officer's device beeped. Captain, you should see these readings. The human cellular structure. It's amazing. They've managed to maintain complete biological function while achieving near-perfect energy displacement. We're willing to share some of our medical advances, Gray offered. Not the SHIELD technology itself, but other discoveries we made along the way. That's what diplomacy is about, finding ways to help each other grow. Captain Stone stepped forward and did something unprecedented in stalker history. He deliberately bared his own teeth, mimicking the human smile. I believe, Stone said, this is the beginning of a very interesting relationship between our peoples. Gray's genuine smile in response held no trace of diplomatic training. For the first time since arriving, it was purely natural. The galaxy was about to change. The next few hours aboard the Swift Claw passed in a way no one could have predicted. The chamber that had been a battlefield was now a meeting room. Gray, still shirtless from the weapon's fire, but maintaining his dignity, sat with the stalker leaders around a large table. Your world, the science officer said, looking at data streams on his device. It's 3 times the gravity of our home planet. How did your species even manage to stand upright? Gray accepted a drink from a stalker crew member, a peace offering in their culture. We adapted. Strong bones, dense muscles, efficient hearts. But that also made us look threatening to other species. Like us, Lieutenant Reed added. He had been quiet, taking notes on everything the humans said. We evolved from ambush hunters. Light gravity meant we could leap from high places, strike quickly. Seeing a species that could simply endure, it triggered old instincts. Captain Stone nodded. We assumed your strength meant aggression. We never considered it could be turned to purely defensive purposes. That's why we created Project SHIELD, Gray explained, setting down his drink. Humanity's history taught us that looking strong often leads to conflict, but being truly invulnerable lets us prove our peaceful intentions through actions. The science officer's device projected a hologram of Gray's cellular structure. The energy absorption is remarkable. But you said this was only given to diplomats. Why not your military? Because then we'd never have peace, Gray said simply. If we made our soldiers invulnerable, every species would race to find ways to kill us. They'd develop bigger weapons, more dangerous technologies. But making our diplomats invulnerable, that leads to conversations like this one. Stone leaned forward. Tell me about the first SHIELD diplomat. There must have been fear, resistance to the idea. Gray smiled, and this time none of the stalkers flinched at the expression. The first was Admiral White. She volunteered because she had seen too much war. When the project succeeded, she walked alone into the middle of a battlefield between two alien species. Both sides emptied their weapons at her, when she was still standing, still smiling, still asking for peace. They finally listened. Like you did with us, Reed realized. Yes, though usually there's less shooting, Gray said with a small laugh. Most species don't have your military precision. I'm still impressed by your tactical coordination. Stone's chest swelled slightly with pride. We train extensively. Though I admit, we've never trained for an opponent who simply stands there and takes the hits. That's the point, Gray explained. We're not opponents. We're potential allies who haven't understood each other yet. The SHIELD program lets us prove that with more than words. The science officer looked up from his readings. These cellular modifications, they could help our people. Our low-gravity evolution left us with brittle bones compared to humans. Medical exchange would be a good starting point for relations, Gray agreed. We've learned a lot about cellular regeneration and bone density. Things that could help many species. Stone stood suddenly, his full height impressive even in the spacious chamber. The Stalker High Command will want to know about this. About you. About humanity's unique approach to diplomacy. That's why I'm here, Gray said, standing as well. To open dialogue. To share knowledge. To turn misunderstanding into cooperation. Lieutenant Reed raised his empty weapon. Should we apologize for shooting you so many times? Gray laughed, a warm sound that seemed to lighten the mood of the entire chamber. No need. Consider it a very thorough first contact protocol. Though perhaps we can find less explosive ways to communicate in the future. Yes, Stone said, attempting another smile. I believe we can. The ship's communication system chimed. New messages from both Human Union patrol ships and Stalker High Command were arriving. The real work of diplomacy was about to begin. 1 month after the shooting incident aboard the Swift Claw, the Great Hall of the Stalker High Command buzzed with activity. Diplomatic Officer Gray, now wearing a new uniform, stood beside Captain Stone as they watched representatives from both species sign the first human-stalker cooperation treaty. Hard to believe a month ago you were ordering your crew to shoot me, Gray said quietly, a small smile playing on his lips. Stone's yellow eyes showed amusement. Hard to believe a month ago. We thought a smile was a death threat. He paused, then added, though I still think our weapons should have at least scratched you. Your weapons were impressive, Gray assured him. Best coordinated attack I've ever experienced. The SHIELD program directors were very interested in the records. Lieutenant Reed, now serving as head of the new Human Stalker Cultural Exchange Program, approached them with a datapad. The medical exchange is already showing results. Our scientists say the human bone density treatments could help our children grow stronger even in low gravity. And your stealth technology is remarkable, Gray replied. Who would have thought predator adaptations could improve our diplomatic vessels? Easier to help people if they don't see us as threatening from a distance. The science officer, who had been promoted after his detailed analysis of Project SHIELD, joined their conversation. 3 more species have requested peace talks after hearing about what happened on the Swift Claw. They want to meet the smiling humans who can't be killed. and who want to be friends rather than conquerors, Stone added. Though I still don't fully understand why your people chose this path. Gray watched as the treaty was finalized, official seals being applied by both sides. Because true strength isn't about how much damage you can do. It's about how much you can take while maintaining your principles. Philosophy from an indestructible diplomat, Reed said with a clicking sound that the translators now recognized as laughter. The galaxy wasn't ready for humans. The galaxy wasn't ready for any of us, Gray corrected. That's why we explore, why we reach out. Every species has something to teach, something to learn. The ceremony concluded, and applause filled the great hall, humans clapping, stalkers making their traditional victory clicks. Stone turned to Gray with a serious expression. The High Command has approved the Joint Patrol Initiative, he said. Human shield diplomats and stalker tactical experts working together to help maintain peace in disputed sectors. Perfect combination, Gray nodded. Your people know how to handle conflict. Mine know how to absorb the damage while talking things out. Together, we can help prevent misunderstandings like ours. The science officer's device beeped. Speaking of preventing misunderstandings, the cultural database has been updated. Smiling is now listed as a friendly human expression, rather than a potential death threat in our first contact protocols. They all shared a moment of amusement at that. Reed activated a large display screen showing a map of nearby sectors. Look at all the potential diplomatic contacts in range. With your shield technology and our tactical experience, we can help a lot of people, Gray finished, and learn from them too. Captain Stone straightened to his full height and did something that would have been unthinkable a month ago. He smiled, showing his sharp teeth in a perfect imitation of a human expression. To the future of human-stalker cooperation. To understanding, Gray added, returning the smile. As they stood there, human and stalkers together, watching more officials discuss future plans, Gray thought about how this had all started, with a simple misunderstanding about a smile. Now that same expression was becoming a symbol of cooperation between their species. Sometimes, he reflected, the strongest weapons weren't weapons at all. Sometimes, the strongest weapon was the ability to take everything your opponent could throw at you and still offer them friendship. And sometimes, all it took to change the galaxy was a smile that couldn't be erased.